Welcome back to episodes of Kynn. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the truth about why good people do bad things, and why almost nobody sees it coming, not in others, and especially not in themselves. This audio recording includes subtitles, so you can follow along more intentionally and absorb the ideas at your own pace. You've probably experienced this at some point, maybe more than once. Someone you trusted completely, someone genuinely kind, generous, the last person you'd expect, did something that felt completely out of character. Lied, betrayed a confidence, went along with something cruel they would have condemned in any other context. And the confusing part wasn't just what they did, it was how normal they seemed while doing it, how easily they explained it afterward, how little it seemed to disturb their own sense of being a decent person. And it turns out this isn't a rare exception. It's one of the most consistent, well-documented patterns in human behavior, and understanding it changes the way you see almost everyone, including yourself. Here's where it starts, and it starts earlier than you'd think. Most of us build our identity around being good, long before we're capable of actually examining what that means. A child is told they're kind, and they begin organizing their whole sense of self around that label. Being good becomes less like a set of consistent actions, and more like a fixed fact about who you are. Something you already are, rather than something you have to keep choosing. And once that identity is locked in, something subtle but important happens. You stop being primarily motivated to act well. You become primarily motivated to protect the story that you already are someone who acts well. Those sound like the same thing, but they're not, and the difference between them is exactly where this pattern takes root. Here's the hidden cost of building your identity this way. When your sense of self depends on already being good, any evidence that contradicts that story becomes something to manage rather than something to learn from. So instead of looking honestly at an action that doesn't fit the story, you reinterpret the action until it fits. This isn't conscious deception, most of the time. It's something quieter and more automatic. A small unkindness gets relabeled as honesty. A moment of convenient silence gets relabeled as not wanting to make things worse. A decision that benefited you at someone else's expense gets relabeled as something you had no real choice about. Each of these reinterpretations feels completely sincere in the moment, because the goal was never to lie to yourself on purpose. The goal was to protect an identity that couldn't survive being questioned directly. And here's what makes this so dangerous, rather than just mildly self-serving. Once you're in the habit of reinterpreting your own behavior to protect your self-image, you lose the one mechanism that would normally stop small compromises from escalating: your own honest discomfort. Most serious harm doesn't begin with someone deciding to become a bad person. It begins with a small compromise that gets explained away successfully, which makes the next, slightly larger compromise easier to explain away too. Each step feels like a minor, forgivable exception to who you really are, rather than a data point about who you're actually becoming. And because your identity as a good person was never up for real reconsideration, nothing internal ever stops the pattern. The story stays intact the entire way down. There's a second mechanism running alongside this one, and it's just as important. Responsibility feels different depending on how it's distributed. When a harmful outcome comes from your decision alone, made consciously, with no one else involved, most people feel the weight of it clearly. But the moment responsibility gets spread across a group, an instruction from someone in authority, a decision made collectively, a role you were simply assigned inside a larger system, that felt weight drops sharply, even though the actual harm caused hasn't changed at all. This is why ordinary, decent individuals can participate in something cruel as part of a group, a workplace, a crowd, a family system, that they would never have initiated alone. The action is the same. The felt sense of personal responsibility for it is completely different, because part of the mind quietly reasons, I was just following what was expected of me here. I wasn't the one who decided this should happen. That reasoning is rarely conscious or deliberate. It simply lowers the internal alarm that would normally go off, and a lowered alarm means less resistance the next time something similar is asked of you. There's a third piece to this, and it's the part most people find hardest to accept about themselves. Almost nobody experiences their own harmful behavior as harmful while it's happening. They experience it as reasonable, given the circumstances. The person who betrays a friend usually has, in their own mind, a fully worked out account of why it wasn't really betrayal, why the friend had it coming in some way, why the situation was more complicated than a simple label like betrayal could capture. This isn't because these people are unusually skilled liars. It's because the human mind is built to protect coherence more than it's built to protect accuracy. A version of events where you're still the good person you believe yourself to be will almost always feel more true than a version where you weren't, regardless of what actually happened, and this preference operates well beneath conscious awareness. Put these three mechanisms together, and you get the actual explanation for why good people do bad things. It's not that goodness is fake, or that everyone is secretly cruel underneath a thin layer of manners. It's that goodness, when it's treated as a fixed identity instead of an active practice, stops being something you protect through your actions and starts being something you protect through your explanations. Add in the diffusion of responsibility that comes from acting inside a group or a hierarchy, and the mind's automatic preference for a coherent self-story over an accurate one, and you have a system that can walk a genuinely decent person through a long series of small, individually explainable steps towards something they would have found unthinkable if you'd described the destination to them at the very beginning. This is also exactly why the people who cause serious harm are so rarely the obviously villainous ones. Someone who openly enjoys cruelty is easy to identify and easy to avoid. The far more common and far more dangerous pattern is someone thoroughly convinced of their own decency, moving through a sequence of small, defensible compromises, each one keeping their self-image intact, right up until the outcome is something they'd never have agreed to if it had been presented all at once, at the very start. And here's the part that's genuinely uncomfortable to sit with, but worth sitting with anyway. This isn't a description of unusually weak or flawed people. It's a description of how the ordinary human mind operates by default, which means the honest question isn't whether you're the kind of person this could happen to. It's under what specific conditions it becomes more likely for you, personally, because the conditions matter more than most people want to admit. Fear, pressure to conform to a group, an authority figure giving clear instructions, anonymity, a slow accumulation of small compromises nobody stopped to question. All of these measurably increase the odds that a genuinely decent person will act in ways that don't match their own self-image, and none of them require you to be a bad person to begin with. So what actually protects against this, if believing you're good doesn't? The answer isn't more certainty about your own character. It's the opposite, a habit of staying suspicious of your own explanations, specifically in the moments they arrive most easily. When you notice yourself reaching for a justification a little too smoothly, this doesn't really count. Everyone would have done the same thing. It wasn't really my decision. That ease is worth treating as a signal rather than a resolution. The people who are genuinely least likely to cause the kind of harm we're describing here aren't the ones most convinced of their own goodness. They're the ones who stay a little uncomfortable with how easily they can talk themselves into things, and who treat that discomfort as useful information instead of something to explain away. Practically, this means building in a small pause before actions that involve any kind of compromise, a moment to ask, if someone else did exactly this, would I actually accept their explanation? Or does it just sound reasonable because it's coming from me? It means paying closer attention in group settings, workplaces, family systems, any situation where responsibility is shared, because that's precisely where the internal alarm gets quietest, even though the stakes haven't changed. And it means treating your own goodness as something you're actively maintaining through your actual choices today, not a fact you already settled a long time ago and no longer need to check on. Because the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this is that character isn't really tested by who you are when nothing is asking anything of you. It's tested by what you do in the specific conditions that make cutting a corner feel reasonable, quiet, and easily explained. Good people don't do bad things because they were secretly bad all along. They do it because goodness stopped being a practice and became an assumption, and assumptions, unlike practices, don't require anything from you in order to keep believing them. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've caught yourself explaining something away a little too smoothly, or watched it happen in someone you trusted, leave a comment and let me know what stood out. Chances are, You're not the only one who's noticed this. Thanks for listening to episodes of Kynn. Take care of your mind, and I'll see you in the next episode.